In 1883, Austrian hiker Conrad Kane was born. Dissatisfied with his life in Austria, he moved to Canada and joined the Alpine Club as their first professional trail guide. Throughout his time there, he was the first to reach the summit of nearly 70 Canadian mountains. His most notable expedition was in 1910, where he attempted to be the first to reach the summit of a glacier mountain range in British Columbia. His team struggled the entire time as the hike was more challenging than anyone expected. One of Kane's team members called the journey a veritable bugaboo, an old mining term referring to a dead end. Kane was not known for being a quitter, so he continued on. After a few attempts, Kane made it to the top of the mountain, defying all of the odds that were stacked against him. As he gazed over the impressive and beautiful mountain range, he remembered the remark that his team member made earlier, and thus he decided to call the mountain range the Bugaboo Mountains. While it may seem like I'm standing outside of a slightly below average Mexican food restaurant, this is actually a historic site. I'm standing at the site of the former Methuen, Massachusetts location of Bugaboo Creek Steakhouse. I used to come here every year or so to celebrate my birthday. Me and my grandpa actually have the same birthday, so we'd all come here together to celebrate. We actually used to go to a different location, but that one was torn down and turned into an Aldi's. When we tried to go one year, I was shocked to hear that every single location had unceremoniously shut down. So the question on my mind was, what happened? So what made the steakhouse so iconic? And why did every single location close? And just what the hell is that thing? Join me as I take you on a flavorful journey all the way back to the beginning of Bugaboo Creek. Edward P. Grace III, better known as Ned, began his food service career by washing dishes in a restaurant in his hometown of Bristol, Connecticut. After graduating from the University of Vermont in 1973, he opened his first restaurant, called the Jolly Butcher's Tavern, located in West Brattleboro, Vermont. It's actually still there to this day, albeit under a different name, now called the New England House. He then purchased the Old Grist Mill Tavern in Seekonk, Massachusetts, and Hemingway's Seafood in Providence, Rhode Island, just a few years later. Ned's most successful venture by far would come in 1990 with the opening of the Capitol Grill, with its first location also in Providence. This was envisioned as a fancy upscale eatery for those seeking a premium experience, which directly contrasted the rundown state of downtown Providence at the time. Despite all of this, the steakhouse was a massive success, calling for rapid expansion into other major East Coast US cities such as Washington, D.C., Boston, and New York City. Currently, the Capitol Grill operates 63 locations in 28 states, as well as 2 international locations in Costa Rica and Mexico. The success of the Capitol Grill led Ned to create a new company, Rare Hospitality, which included the Capitol Grill. Around this time, themed family restaurants were an up-and-coming market. Families were looking for a more immersive dining experience without having to travel too far. Rainforest Cafe and Chuck E. Cheese were major examples of this, with both chains reaching the height of their popularity in the 90s. Refined, adult-oriented themed restaurants were also taking shape, with Hard Rock Cafe and Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville opening in the mid to late 80s. Ned saw the potential here, and decided that the next Rare Hospitality venture would be a heavily themed restaurant catered to kids and families. Of course, this would turn out to be Bugaboo Creek Steakhouse.
Log cabin with a roaring fire. Eat and drink till your heart's desire. Make it up fresh, we pile it up high. Can't get enough, so you keep coming by. 'Cause we got flavors for you. Bugaboo. We got flavors for you.
Fresh ingredients, hearty helpings, and big, bold flavors. Bugaboo Creek Steakhouse.
'Cause we got flavors for you. Bugaboo.
Bugaboo Creek's first location opened in October 1992 in the parking lot of a La Quinta Hotel at 30 Jefferson Boulevard in Warwick, Rhode Island, which was formerly the site of a Red Coach Grill. On the outside, the steakhouse sported an outdoorsy lodge look with red and green accents. The neon sign, which also served as the company's logo, featured the iconic Canadian Rockies, as well as a moose named Moxie, who served as the mascot of the restaurant. The most iconic feature would be the life-size moose statues boldly scattered around the courtyard. In 1994, one of these moose statues outside was stolen.
True story. Somebody took the moose. They stole the moose.
You're right.
You're right, they did.
There are some legs there.
There's some legs left, but as you can plainly see, the moose is gone. Yeah.
Thankfully, Moxie was found by 2 Rhode Island fishermen who found him washed ashore with broken antlers, but otherwise unharmed. I don't think I would have been able to sleep soundly tonight if I didn't know that Moxie was safe. Bugaboo Creek was inspired by Conrad Kane's journey up the Bugaboo Mountains. People like Conrad, trailblazers, hikers, and adventurers, would need a place to rest after a long day of hiking through the Canadian Rockies. They'd need hearty food and big drinks to fuel their next adventures. The lodges had hardwood accents and Canadian-themed decorations sprinkled throughout. Every lodge had a fireplace and taxidermied animal heads, as well as outdoorsy Canadian decorations displayed throughout. It really did feel like a cozy lodge, especially with the red plaid everywhere. Waitstaff were even referred to as trail guides. The steakhouse would become a hit with families, due to its fun theming and large portion sizes. This success, of course, called for expansion. 10 months after the first location opened, a second location opened in Seekonk, Massachusetts. 2 more Massachusetts locations, in Peabody and Watertown, opened the following year, as well as the first location outside of New England, located in Springfield, Virginia. At its peak, Bugaboo Creek operated 31 lodges, mostly in New England. I thought this was a much more local thing, but I'm glad to hear that those of you down south got to experience this a little bit too. Another big draw was, oddly enough, coupons. If you joined the email list The Creek Club, you would receive tons of valuable coupons to use at the steakhouse. Even without the coupons, there were still plenty of deals to go around. Free kids meals, half-price appetizers, and more were incredibly common to see. In 2007, Bugaboo Creek and Capital Grill were sold to Darden Restaurants, which is arguably the largest currently operating restaurant conglomerate, operating chains such as the Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse. This is ironic, since Longhorn is the closest thing to a Bugaboo Creek that currently exists. Both of these were chain steakhouses with a distinct regional theme, with Longhorn being themed to Texas. Most menu items were pretty similar too. After this, Bugaboo would be sold to Tremere and Capital Holdings, who also owned and operated Charlie Brown Steakhouses, with no affiliation to the Peanuts. Under the new ownership, the menu added more options for customizability. Ned would go on to give seminars on restaurant operations in Florida, and eventually become a director for Benihana. The most important part of any good restaurant is obviously the atmosphere, but the second most important part is probably the food. Food on the menu is your typical steakhouse fare. Highlights include the Moose Breath Burger, which got its name due to the garlic and mushrooms on it. Other popular dishes included the Snowbird Chicken Platter, the Bugaboo Filet, grilled rainbow trout, campfire cheesesteak, Blue Mountain Steak Salad, Charlie's Smashed Potatoes, the Bigfoot Chocolate Chip Cookie, and the Chocolate Mousse Cake. Lobster would also seasonally appear on the menu, and there was a hearty selection of steaks. At some locations, breakfast was served. Adults could look forward to enjoying moose juice. The restaurant would stack pineapples in this big jar and allow Grey Goose vodka to diffuse inside. It would then be mixed into various cocktails that would rotate over time. Kids could enjoy the usuals: chicken nuggets, quesadillas, and hot diggity dogs. They could also look forward to receiving a free ice cream sandwich, or other frozen treats such as a Hoodsie Cup, after their meal. If you signed up for the Bugaboo Birthday Club, a card would be sent to you in the mail. This was phased out in later years, but birthdays were still a big draw for customers at the steakhouse. More on that later. The consensus on the food is that it's all decent chain steakhouse fare. Except for the bread. I vividly remember and miss this delicious, warm, fresh, crispy brown bread and butter. It was free with your meal and you could order as much as you wanted. That actually sounds pretty good. So obviously one of the most important aspects of Bugaboo Creek is the food. So I thought it might be fun to recreate a meal you might be able to get at the steakhouse back in the day. So join me on this flavorful journey within a flavorful journey as we start where any good Bugaboo Creek meal starts, with a loaf of bread. The bread recipe is one I found from Lori of Lip Smacking Goodness, a vegan recipe blog. I've never actually successfully made my own bread before, but I have high hopes that this one will turn out okay. The first step is to let the yeast sit in some water and sugar until it bubbles into this foamy mixture. Meanwhile, we'll combine some molasses, oil, and salt into this big bowl we'll use for mixing. The brown bread here is actually rye bread, so we'll use rye flour to start. I really wish that I had a stand mixer or something right now, because at this point, all I'm doing is a lot of mixing. First, we mix this concoction together, then we add some water, then we add back the yeast mixture from before, and then we'll add 3 cups of all-purpose regular flour. This is where things started getting really hard to mix. I kneaded the loaf for a while off camera, then I put it into this larger bowl to let it rise. We'll check back on it later, but for now, let's work on the entree. Bugaboo Creek was the only place in the world that you could get a moose breath burger, so I thought it would be appropriate to make one. No burger is complete without a side of fries, so I cut up some russet potatoes. Bugaboo Creek always boasted that their fries were seasoned. Let's throw these bad boys into the air fryer as we saute our mushrooms. There was no recipe for this burger I could find online, so it's pretty much up to my own interpretation based off of the menu. The menu was very specific about using half-pound USDA choice beef. They might actually be too big for the pan. I'm not used to making burgers quite this big. After a few minutes, we'll flip them. There is nothing more authentically New England than some Market Basket Vermont sharp cheddar, so that's what I'll use for cheese. As the cheese melts, we'll slice up our tomatoes and put some mayo on these bakery fresh buns. A unique thing that I added that wasn't on the menu was some crispy onions that you find in the salad aisle. I figured it would be good to add a bit of crunch, and since onions also give you a bad breath, I thought it would add to the name. And big reveal, here it is! A homemade Bugaboo Creek meal. If only I had a moose head on the wall and some more Canadian flair in my house. The moose breath burger actually wasn't too bad. I wish there was a more distinct sauce, as it was a little dry. I think the idea at the restaurant is that you'd put your own ketchup on it to your taste. The fries actually came out really good, really crispy and not too salty. While the burgers were cooking, the bread was baking in the oven. I was the most nervous about the bread, but it actually came out not too bad. It's not as good as the Bugaboo bread, I probably could have kneaded it longer, and it's not as flavorful as I remember. But it's the best bread I've ever made, so I'm proud of it. Overall, this meal turned out pretty good. Granted, I had fresh ingredients and I was only cooking for myself and my fiance, so the quality at a chain steakhouse where you're cooking for hundreds is probably not on par with this. Either way, let's get back to some more Bugaboo Creek history.
Can't beat the delicious large portions in our warm atmosphere. Our variety of mouth-watering dishes are sure to impress the taste buds of the whole family. Whether it's a special occasion or just a night on the town, the bar at Bugaboo Creek can quench your thirst with a full list of specialty drinks and icy cold drafts. Stop in or call today to make a reservation. We are gonna love our lodge.
The main draw of Bugaboo Creek was its impressive display of animatronic animals throughout the restaurant. While other animatronic restaurants might have very heavy theming or lore, Bugaboo Creek makes up for this by making all of the characters completely aware of what they are. They all know that they're robots in a family steakhouse, and they really let you know that they know that. They'll talk about the menu items while letting you know that they're robots stuck on the wall. Not every Bugaboo was made equal. There's 2 characters that were consistently at every single location. One of them is Moxie the Moose, the main character. Some restaurants called Moxie by different names, such as Goose, but most of them called the moose Moxie. Moxie resembled a taxidermied moose head, and they tell customers about some of the more popular menu items.
Moxie the Moose here. Now, I don't want to appear immodest, but out of all the talking animals here at Bugaboo, I'm the one who has the most menu items named after them. Check it out. You got your moose juice, your moose breath burger, your chocolate mousse cake. So you see, I'm not tooting my own horn here, and I have a lot of horn to toot. So, toodaloo for now.
The other one is Bill the Buffalo, who would serenade customers with original songs.
Gonna take a flavorful journey. Oh, excuse me. Didn't know anyone else was here. Usually I only sing in the shower. That little bit of singing was what you might call a departure from the ordinary.
But then so is everything here at Bugaboo. I mean, where else in this town can you eat a moose breath burger?
These two would interrupt meals with short audio bits like these ones, which usually lasted around 30 seconds. Guests would be able to tell when the characters were about to talk due to the spotlights that would light up on the wall around them. What's interesting is that the following characters would start at the Warwick location as a sort of prototype, and then they would be refined and shipped off to the other locations after initial testing. Interchangeably between locations would be a raccoon in a barrel or a skunk in a pair of pants. They were usually placed near Moxie and would pop out in 5 to 10 minute intervals, look around, then retreat back into their barrel or pants. The other animals included a flopping fish, a squirrel swinging on a lantern, and some miscellaneous birds. While they weren't as complex as Bill or Moxie, they did add a lot of kinetic energy to the dining room. All of these animatronics resembled real taxidermied animals, but there are two more characters that were a little different. First, there's the Canadian Mountie. While he was an animatronic at most of these locations, he would frequently break down. Most of the time, he was just a statue. Still, he looks kinda, The final animatronic, arguably the most infamous among the whole gang, was Timber the Talking Christmas Tree. Jesus Christ. He sits at the front of the lobby where he talks about Canadian historical and geographical facts.
Hey, have you ever seen the Canadian flag? Well, I'm very proud to say that the leaf on that flag is an exact likeness of a leaf that belonged to my great uncle, Maury Maple. Maury has beautiful leaves, the best looking in all the provinces. Of course, throughout history, people have disputed that it actually is one of Maury's leaves on that flag. But to anyone who knew my great uncle, it's obvious.
The facts he said weren't always true, as you can see. We didn't have him at my location, but I feel like it would have really scared me as a kid. Imagine not knowing that the tree talks and seeing it come to life like that. Real scary stuff. But that's not even the worst part. If you were lucky enough to have your birthday at Bugaboo Creek, oh boy. Most places would just sing happy birthday. Some restaurants even put their own original spin on the song. Bugaboo Creek went one step further. Every employee in the restaurant would clap and sing the Bugaboo birthday song. Just when you least expect it, and I'm not joking, they'd bring out this giant puppet moose head. At the end of the song, they'd ask you to kiss the moose.
You got to kiss the moose. You got to kiss the moose. You got to kiss the moose. You got to kiss the moose. Pucker her up, put those lips to good use. You got to kiss the moose. 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 With a face like that, who can refuse?
In the 2010s, Bugaboo Creek began its downfall, starting in July 2010 where the chain was put up for sale. In November 2010, 18 lodges were abruptly closed. A few weeks later, the company filed for Chapter 11. The company remained in bankruptcy for 4 months. Less than a year later, on July 15, 2011, Bugaboo was sold to Capital BC Holdings. Christopher Campbell took over as president of the steakhouse. Chris took it upon himself to flip the script on the public's view of the restaurant. For his first 6 months, he traveled to every single operating lodge and spoke to the employees there. His rebrand included a new menu, which added new value items and brought back fan favorites, new uniforms, and a new logo. He also worked to create a line of Bugaboo beers, but I don't think anything ever came of this. These changes weren't popular, as many reported that the food had gotten worse and the prices had actually gone up. One of the more interesting choices that he made was the idea that trail guides should use a more thematically appropriate name. For example, if your name was Greg, it could potentially be changed into something like Forrester. In retrospect, this downfall was inevitable. As a whole, themed entertainment was losing its popularity. Rainforest Cafe began shutting down several locations around this time. Chuck E. Cheese started to phase out its animatronic shows altogether. Bill Burnett, the new president of Capital BC Holdings, stated that the concept for Bugaboo had actually gotten old. With the rise of smartphones and tablets amongst kids, entertainment built into restaurants was no longer a draw. Most family chain restaurants would begin to install Zayas tablets at every table, which not only simplified the bill paying process, but also came with a la carte entertainment options for kids. I imagine that the maintenance cost on these tablets was much cheaper than maintaining animatronics or even installing new ones. The animatronics themselves were also starting to show their age, as they were all in pretty rough shape. They'd either be extremely clicky,
Scheduled departures from the ordinary. So buckle your seat.
parts would be broken, or they just wouldn't move at all. Some lodges just stopped operating them altogether. This is also around the time that Yelp became popular, so I went back and reviewed some of the reviews for the steakhouse. They were not great. Complaints were cited for food quality being subpar, portions actually being small, rude waitstaff, and even the interiors themselves. Most reviews commented on how annoying Moxie was, and how the inside of the lodge felt tacky. Everyone I talked to about Bugaboo Creek had positive memories of when they went as a kid, so I was really surprised to see all these reviews so negative. Between 2010 and 2015, 7 more lodges closed. The final nail in the coffin was in 2016, when Bugaboo Creek closed its doors at every single remaining location.
First shutting down. For the second time in about a week, a popular chain has shut down operations in Rhode Island. Bugaboo Creek is closing its locations in southern New England.
These closures were met with little fanfare, as employees would just show up to work one day to find a note that the restaurant had been closed.
Jeff Rollins is on a business trip and says he ate at the Warwick location Tuesday night. And did you notice anything amiss that they were closing down at all? Or?
Nothing, and dinner was fine, service was good.
Immediately after, auctions were held online and in person for assets of the restaurant. Chairs, decorations, kitchen equipment, etc.
If you've ever been here, you're probably wondering, where's the talking moose? He's not talking. No one's saying a word.
Most importantly, all of the animatronics were auctioned off and sold. Many were sold to enthusiasts and collectors, and some were sold to other restaurants. The River's Edge in Scituate, Massachusetts is one place where you can find an old Moxie animatronic mounted on the wall above the bar. While all 31 lodges are now closed, the memories still live on for us New Englanders that grew up going here. Every single location was either renovated into a different restaurant or store, or completely demolished and turned into parking. The Gaithersburg location was turned into BC's Steakhouse, which was pitched as a Bugaboo with minimal theming. Aimed more at adults, this new location removed all of the animatronics. There were plans to open more of these, but the single location was shut down pretty quickly after, and turned into a Carvana vending machine. On April 3rd, 2017 at 1:15 in the afternoon, smoke was reported coming out of the Portland Bugaboo Creek. The South Portland Fire Department was on the scene quickly, and they were able to put it out with no injuries. The cause of the fire was likely due to the electrical within the abandoned building. The building was demolished a few years later to make room for a plasma donation center. The identity of the iconic steakhouse was unfortunately completely erased at every single location, except for one. The Lucky Moose Casino and Tavern is the former site of the Nashua, New Hampshire location, which was about 45 minutes from my house. The exterior still looks exactly the same. Even Moxie is still here, proudly displayed on the roof. You can even see him from the highway. I asked about filming the inside of the casino, but they politely asked me to refrain, which is completely understandable since it is a casino. I walked around and I was instantly brought back to the times at Bugaboo. A lot of the rustic lodge feel was still unchanged. This time, instead of being Canadian themed, it's more themed to New Hampshire, with maps and posters themed to the state hung up around the walls. There's even a real Moxie animatronic head on the wall. He no longer talks, but this is indeed the real deal. He's much bigger in person, bigger than I was expecting. The menu is mostly completely changed, so I wasn't able to try a moose breath burger for real. The one exception, however, was the moose juice, which I finally got to try after all these years. I'm happy to report that it was actually really good. It was absolutely the highlight of the meal, and I would drink it again. We weren't too hungry when we got here, so we ordered some appetizers to share. No brown bread, unfortunately, but we did try some buffalo chicken dip, poutine, and steak and cheese egg rolls. The food was disappointing, which is probably the most authentic Bugaboo Creek thing I could possibly say about it. While there is no singular, clear reason for Bugaboo's closure, its shift in management, lack of quality control, An outdated concept are the three biggest culprits. The downfall of Bugaboo Creek was inevitable, as there was no way it would have survived COVID. Can you imagine getting takeout from Bugaboo Creek? Even if it was still around today, I don't think I'd think about it all too much, especially not to the extent that I have for the past 20 minutes or so. While it may be a relic of the past lost to time, those of us who kissed the moose, who heard a buffalo sing, and who adventured across the Canadian Rockies without ever leaving a shopping mall will always have the memories.
Log cabin with a roaring fire. Eat and drink till your heart's desire. Make it up fresh, we pile it up high. Can't get enough, so you keep coming by. 'Cause we got flavors for you. Bugaboo. We got flavors for you.
I own these parts.
I'm pretty sure you don't, Cole.
It's slaw. Coleslaw.
Right.
And I got the deed.
The deed to the west?
You bet, buddy.